I have been delivering sermons now for 44 years without measurable effect. Violence, greed, injustice, I preached against them all, and they're still with us. Phyllis Diller stayed married for 26 years, but she said she should have known early on that the marriage was doomed. For our first wedding anniversary, Phyllis said, my husband, Fang, gave me luggage. It was packed. But even though it took her 26 years, Phyllis finally got wise it wasn't working. Me, I'm still preaching. Now, I know it is difficult for us Unitarian Universalists to measure success. Evangelical preachers can count the number of people who give themselves to Jesus. Hindu wise men can measure the power of their preaching by how many of their followers reincarnate as amoeba, say, and how many as cattle. But it's tougher for us, as it is in all things religious. I love the story of the young Unitarian Universalist boy who was engaged to be married to a young woman who had grown up in the intricacies of high church Anglicanism. And so to acquaint her fiancé with the complexities of the Anglican service, she took him one Sunday to Christ Church Cathedral in Oxford. And throughout the service, the young man was kneeling and leaping up and chanting and reading from the Book of Common Prayer until finally, sweating and exhausted, he took out his handkerchief and he wiped his brow and he laid his handkerchief over his lap to dry. And when she saw this, the young woman leaned over to him and she whispered, "Darling, is your fly open?" To which the rattled young man replied, "No, but should it be?" So it's much harder for us, but I'm going to try one more time this morning to have a measurable impact on the world. And I want to begin by telling you a little bit about Roger Williams. You know, the guy who founded Rhode Island. Now, let's face it, Roger Williams was a nutcase. And the colony that he founded, Rhode Island, became the refuge for every flower child and ne'er-do-well in the New World. There really weren't any identifiable Unitarians or Universalists back then, but if there had been, they would all have been shacked up in Rhode Island, eating quahogs and Johnny cakes, and Rhode Island's greatest contribution to culinary glory, the chow mein sandwich. That's a scoop of chow mein between two pieces of Wonder Bread. Good. The Puritans used to call Rhode Island the sewer of New England. They were speaking theologically. They'd never even heard of the chow mein sandwich. Now, what is interesting to me about Roger Williams is this. Roger Williams referred to the Native Americans as barbarians. I know that doesn't sound too enlightened, but of course, mid-17th century, all Europeans called Native Americans barbarians. But Roger Williams believed that despite the fact that Native Americans were barbarians, they had rights. They shouldn't be coerced, for example, into abandoning their own religious beliefs. They should actually be paid for the land that the Puritans were stealing from them. That was a crazy thought and particularly offensive to the Puritans. That's why they exiled Williams to that wilderness of Rhode Island. And why did Roger Williams believe, contrary to virtually all other Europeans at the time, that even barbarians had rights? Well, of course, he believed they were children of God, but he believed something far more important. He believed that only God could say who was or was not his child, and that in the meantime, it was our job as human beings to create a civil order that was fit for everybody whether God determined that they were one of his children or not. In other words, he believed that all it took to make somebody eligible to be treated decently was that they be a human being. They didn't have to be Puritans. They didn't have to be saved. They didn't have to be rich. They didn't have to be white. They didn't have to have a pretty face. They could even be barbarians, and yet we had to still extend them basic human kindness. Do you have any idea how radical a thought that was in 1682? Do you have any idea how radical a thought that is in 2014? If Unitarian Universalism stands for anything today, it stands for the notion that the names that we apply to human beings, Muslim, illegal immigrant, foreigner, criminal, disabled, barbarian, that names do not wipe out a person's claim to be treated with fundamental decency. This is at the heart of our theological conviction. For unlike the mainstream Puritans of Roger Williams' day, unlike, say, the Wahhabi Muslims in Saudi Arabia today, unlike the ultra-Orthodox Jews in the occupied territories today, unlike Christian identity fundamentalists all over the United States today, Unitarian Universalism finds virtue not in some special group to which we belong, not in some special faith that only the initiated can claim, and not even in our identity as children of God. We find virtue in our common frailty, in the fact that every single one of us laughs and breathes and defecates and bleeds. So how do we Unitarian Universalists bring this conviction home, make these values live, make this faith shine? Well, in 1,000 different ways, but one of the best of them is the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. UUSC has been around for 74 years, ever since it started rescuing Jewish victims, the barbarians of their day, from the Nazis. Today, we work in 22 foreign countries and all over the United States, and we always work in partnership with those whom their societies consider barbarians. We do 4 things. We fight for the human right to water. We work for economic justice. We protect political liberties. And whenever there's a major humanitarian crisis around the world, as in the Philippines today, we are there, reaching out to the forgotten people, with partners who are doing the most cutting-edge work, all for a modest amount of money. I'm going to give you just 3 quick examples of what we do. For many years, a big mining company called Goldcorp was allowing toxins from its mine in Guatemala to seep into the water supply of 18 communities of Mayan Indians. Now, Mayan Indians have absolutely no power in Guatemala. They are the barbarians of Guatemalan society. So that's who we wanted to work with. We sent a couple of Unitarian Universalist mining engineers from the University of Colorado to Guatemala to document the damage that Goldcorp was doing. And then we and the Mayan Indians took the case to the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights. And guess what? A few months ago, Goldcorp agreed to pay us $27 million to make us go away. They agreed to use that money to clean up the mines and to install clean water systems in all 18 villages. You did that, you and UUSC. I was in Kenya a short while ago. After every Kenyan election for president, the country has broken out in riots with thousands of people killed. The riots always start with young men from different ethnic tribes trashing the central marketplaces of the big cities. So UUSC had a brilliant, if simple, idea. Invest in those young men, those barbarians, invest in them and help them start their own businesses in those very marketplaces so that they would have a very powerful reason not to destroy them, not to riot. And last April, Kenya had its first violence-free election in decades. You did that, you and UUSC. One more example, this one from Northwest Arkansas. That's the center of the poultry industry. Poultry factories are exceedingly unpleasant places to work. Most of the workers, therefore, are undocumented. Today's American barbarians. Immigration is a complicated issue, but I think we would all agree that if a company hires you to do a job and you do it, undocumented or not, they ought to pay you for it. But far too often the big poultry companies just withhold the workers' wages. They steal them, there's no other word for it, because they know the workers will be too frightened to go to the authorities to report the crime. UUSC and the workers together are not letting them get away with that. So far, we have retrieved $75,000 in back wages. We're bringing litigation. We're publicizing the company's ill deeds. You are doing that, you and UUSC. Well, there is much more that I don't have time to tell you about. We are bringing clean water to Central California. I was in the central part of California, the Central Valley, not too long ago. I turned on a water faucet in the home of one of the residents, and a tadpole flowed out. 13% of Native Americans in this country have no access to potable water. We are doing all of this and so much more, and you are doing it. You are doing what the late, great evangelical preacher, Reverend Ike, used to call tangibilitating. You are tangibilitating your Unitarian Universalist values. And now we even have a mechanism by which you can tangibilitate them even more directly. Along with the UUA, we have created the UU College of Social Justice, and we are bringing hundreds of Unitarian Universalists with us. We're bringing them to Haiti to build eco-villages for the victims of the earthquake there. We are bringing them to the U.S.-Mexican border to work with migrants. We are confronting poverty in India, the civil rights heritage in the American South, the College of Social Justice. Now, I know that all of us have 100 different causes we're asked to contribute to, but there's only one that has all the following characteristics. It bears our Unitarian Universalist name and reflects our values. It spends 81 cents of every dollar on helping people and only 19 on overhead. It is rated 4 stars by Charity Navigator. That's the top rating any charity can receive. It finds the most groundbreaking solutions to the world's problems and implements them cheaply. It makes sure women and women's interests are included in every project. And it's run by Bill Schultz. I know it is very difficult for any of us to get beyond thinking of other people in terms of categories to which they belong: Kenyan, lesbian, street person, barbarian. But at the heart of our religious faith is the conviction that a person's value comes not from a category to which she or he belongs, but come from our common frailty, from the fact that every one of us laughs and breathes and defecates and bleeds. That's what George Orwell recognized about that soldier in the Spanish Civil War. And it's what another soldier recognized too in a more recent war. Listen to the testimony of a truck driver who witnessed a massacre at Srebrenica in 1995 by Bosnian Serb soldiers of hundreds of Muslim men. The Muslims were bound and gagged, and then all of them were machine gunned to death. There was silence after that, the truck driver later told UN investigators. And then out of that pile of dead bodies, not bodies really, just bits of flesh, out of that pile of flesh came a human being. I say I say it was a human being, but it was actually a boy of some 5 or 6 years. It's unbelievable, really. A human being came out and started walking toward the men with machine guns. All these soldiers had had no trouble shooting people. They had just done it. And the commanding officer said, "Shoot him! Shoot the boy!" But the soldiers just froze. And the boy kept walking toward them. "Shoot him! God damn you!" cried the officer. But they all had lowered their rifles, and the boy kept walking. And finally he got to the soldiers who were just standing there. And one of the soldiers, who knows, maybe the one who had just shot the boy's father, one of the soldiers put out his hand and took the little boy's hand and walked him to my truck and said, "Get him out of here." UUSC represents the best chance we have to see the human faces behind the labels and to turn our common frailty into a common commitment to the common good. So, here's your chance now to rehabilitate my confidence in my preaching. UUSC gets no financial support by the UUA. We are supported entirely by you. We have to raise $6 million from you every single year. This church reported to the UUA that you have 1,431 members. Of that, 208 or 14.5% are current members of UUSC. That's not bad, but I think you can do better, don't you? Our goal this morning is to add 78 new members so that you can say that 20% of your congregation are members of UUSC. The suggested contribution is $40. If you give us $100 or more, it will be matched dollar for dollar by the congregation in Shelter Rock, New York. It will automatically become $200. And you know, if you can't afford $40, I'll take anything this morning in the interest of proving the effectiveness of my preaching. A special day, a special just today to increase my confidence. So most of you, I think, received this little envelope in your order of service. Please fill it out, put it into the offering basket, or go to our table right outside the auditorium here and pick up a copy of it. You know, my favorite story from Maurice Sendak, the author of the great children's book, Where the Wild Things Are, is this one. Sendak said that he once received a letter from a child. This is what the letter said. "Dear Mr. Sendak, how much does it cost to get where the wild things are? If it is not too expensive, my sister and I would like to spend the summer there." So I hope you'll join me where the wild things are. It's not too expensive because, you see, in the battle against anguish and despair, it's not enough to wish, not enough to talk, not enough to worship, not enough to hope, not enough to pray. They're all good, but they're not enough. In the face of tyranny and repression and greed and fear, what is required is that we join hands, that we use our power, that we join our sister and brother Unitarian Universalists to make our voices count, to make our values live, to make our faith shine. So give me your hands, give me your feet, give me your hearts, and give me your money. And together, let's hear it for the barbarians. Let's embrace the barbarians. Let's stand solidly with the barbarians, here, there, wherever they are found. Amen.